Hello YouTube, it's me Tabea and this is Not Quite a Degree, and today for this week's video we're talking about books that needed a little extra try. Welcome everyone to my little bookshelf. It's literally like a very little bookshelf. I don't have very many books that I keep around because I'm a very library loving person. I get most of my books from the library, read them and then give them back because I am frankly scared of moving and having to move a ton of heavy boxes down 3 floors of stairs and then up anything between 3 and 5 floors of stairs. So yeah, I kind of like to keep my things light. But anyway, getting books from the library sometimes has the upside, I guess, that you can give them back, and sometimes the downside that you have to give them back. So sometimes I have books where I'm just like, I read them and I'm like, I don't really care too much for it, I guess. And I'm just like, whatever, like I'll put it down, I'll try to read it next week, and then next week, and then next week, and eventually it's 4 weeks later and I'm like, yeah, I already got fined for it, so I might as well give it back. Last month I was fined at 2 different libraries for I think over 10 bucks altogether. I always thought it was not that embarrassing to pay fees to the library because you hand stuff in late, but there is definitely a limit where it does get somewhat embarrassing. Anyway, why are we making this video? I feel like sometimes you have books where you just kind of keep putting off reading them because you're just not that into them, and then you kind of give them back, and then later on you're like, I actually kind of want to know what happened in the end, and then you go back and you get the book again, or get it from your shelf, wherever, and then you finish it and you're like, actually I don't know why I didn't like it first time around. I have 4 books for which that is the case, and I would like to share them with you and maybe motivate you to think about books that you still have on your shelf or that you never have finished from the library, and motivate you to pick them back up and give them a second try. Jumping right in is the reason why we're here today. It's Sadie Smith, Swing Time. I'm just gonna, well, whatever, you probably saw it anyway. It's this little guy, well, it's not that little. This book is about 2 colored girls who grow up in, I think, somewhat of a poor area in London. They both like dancing when they're young, and it just kind of follows their friendship and their life, and one of them is actually super talented and gets into dancing, and the other one is not so talented, and you just kind of follow her as the main character and what she develops to do and how they kind of lose contact and get back in contact, and you know how all that unravels. And it's super interesting in a sense that it kind of takes you to Africa, and it takes you to this like Madonna-esque side character who is not quite a side character, but anyway, and it's just kind of like a really real mixture of things while also being quite out there, I guess. Like, both of them don't have jobs that are jobs that people would pursue in just like a regular career. And I feel like that is the reason why I didn't finish it the first time around, because you kind of follow the character, but I never really felt like I connected with the character. Like, there was no, like, she was talking about all the things that happened, but there was just not enough feeling involved, I guess, to kind of make it real for me. It was just like a lot of cringing, and I mean, I like coming of age stories a lot, but I always find that it's kind of hard to get through the part where they describe their childhood because, well, childhood and puberty can sometimes be a bit awkward and cringy. But the book kind of got through that part, and then usually that is where coming of age stories kind of start picking up in like the pace of how they're written. But this book just kind of didn't pick up pace for me. Like, it just kind of felt like one continuous circle of, and then I did that, and then I did that, and oh, then that happened, and then I met her again, and oh, then she's gone from my life, and it was like, so is anything gonna happen in this? Is there like a climax that we're working towards? There isn't. I just kind of didn't care too much for it. I handed it back into the library, and then now after my exams, actually I read this, I want to say a couple of weeks ago, probably like, I don't know, maybe in June or so, and then in August I was like, I actually kind of feel like reading something that's not too hard to read, but still not like a YA novel, because sometimes those can be a bit too light for me, I guess. And so I was like, you know, why not pick it back up and finish it? And I did, and while there was still throughout the entire book not a change of pace in the writing style, I enjoyed it so much more, possibly because I was in a much more relaxed state of mind, that I was like, oh yeah, I'll just like to have like a good relaxing story. I don't know, but I ended up enjoying it quite a bit and enjoying the character development that happened towards the end, even though it was kind of a bummer that the end was just, it's just like, I'm out of here, bitch. I think it wasn't too well done, and I know that Sadie Smith has done better. So with this book, I'm kind of like, maybe my situation just wasn't right when reading it. Maybe I was too stressed, or just, you know, too in my zone to get into it. I just said the ending wasn't very well done for a Sadie Smith book, and I can say that because I actually read another one of her books, that is NW. This little nice guy. Funny enough, this one I had to pick up twice too, because the first time around I read it, I kind of failed at like the English.
Me fail English? That's impossible.
The English language was too hard for me. No, it wasn't. NW, I keep saying NY, I don't know, because maybe NYC, I don't know. NW for me wasn't a translated read, and usually that's not a problem that I encountered because I'm comfortable reading in English, but this book kind of challenged me in a way. I'm assuming because it's written in like slang and language from that specific London area, but maybe it's also like just her specific writing style in English that doesn't really translate into German that well. But I really struggled following the story and just like even figuring out who was the main character. Was it a he? Was it a she? Like, because it follows several people, and towards the end of the book I was still confused as to who is who and who has met whom and how are they connected. So I still can't quite give you a synopsis of the book. Besides that, there's a lady who I think is a lawyer and another guy who is a drug dealer, I want to say. And at some point in the book I feel like their paths kind of connect and intertwine for a bit because they know each other, and she goes off to be like this really good and great career woman and he still struggles with his life. I want to say that's it. Don't burn me if it isn't. I tried my best. You are probably wondering like, if you didn't even get the book, like how can you say it's good after having then finally finished it at second try? With the first Sadie Smith that I showed you, I actually just picked up where I left off, but with NW, I actually completely restarted it a couple of years later. I feel like because the second time going in, I already knew that it would be a little bit confusing. I kind of just went with it and was like, whatever, I'll just enjoy it. And so I enjoyed it more so for the writing than I enjoyed it for the storyline. So I just kind of went with it and told myself, if I don't get something, that is fine, as long as I can like decently follow the feeling of the whole story, then we're fine. So yeah, and I ended up really enjoying it in the end, even though I still don't really know what it was about. The fourth book that I have in the series of books that I picked up twice before I actually finished it is a book that I actually never finished. It's The Essential Hemingway. This is a collection of Hemingway's work, and I bought this book mainly because I think I wanted to read some Hemingway because I feel like he's a classic. I didn't really know much about him and I thought, I'm gonna be so cultured with this. And I never really got far with it because it's just kind of, it was too hard really to understand where he was coming from and where he was going with the whole thing. And I didn't enjoy it, so I put it down. But then I happened to take a class at uni where we had to, actually it was a class about a publisher in Eastern Germany and their history, and my paper that I had to write for that class was on Hemingway. It didn't require me to read Hemingway, I just had to kind of read the prologues and epilogues of his books. Which I did, but I kind of felt like it would be a bummer to really hand in a paper that talks literally about the entire collection of his work without ever having read a single thing from him, and so I did. So I read his first novel, which is Fiesta, or in English I think it's The Sun Also Rises. It's a very beautiful story about like friends in Spain and Portugal, I think, who are just kind of traveling, and it's like about this whole bull chasing event that's taking place down there. And yeah, it's kind of again like just a story that follows characters without like an actual storyline of things happening, and I feel like that's just like the kind of book that I really enjoy. But again, it's one of those books where I kind of struggled with the language, and here it's not necessarily even the English, it's more like the way things are phrased, because it's such an old book. It was like written in the 1920s, I think, like towards 1930s something, and so I just couldn't really pick up what like he wanted to say at first, but I kind of, you know, at second try forced myself through it and ended up really enjoying again the feeling of like I am doing this and I can do this, and the more I push myself into his works, the more I get them. It was kind of like being in school, and I mean I was at school if you will, and getting like, you know, and you know, like being and like getting a book. At first you're like, I have no idea what the story behind this is, and what does the teacher want to tell me, and why is the curtain blue, and what. And then in the end you're like, oh, actually I see how the dots connect. So that is how I felt with this book. At the end of it I kind of saw how it's like important in a historical context and how it can translate into modern literature. So my, I guess, advice, if you ever had to read a classic and you're like, oh no, I can't, it's too hard, like I can't get into it, try doing it, try pushing yourself through it, even though you don't get every single thing, because usually they aren't that long anyway. And you know, you might still kind of take away some special things from it. Lastly is this beautiful cover. It's a heartbreaking work of Staggering Genius by Dave Eggers. I feel like I had bought these two together actually years and years ago, when I was probably like 18, 19, like a long time ago. And with the Dave Eggers one, I feel like I picked it up like 3 or 4 times. Like I would just always leave my mark in there and then just continue reading and then be like, ah, whatever. And putting it back, and then like half a year later pick it back up, read a couple pages and do that thing like 4 times. I ended up reading it and finishing it this spring, I would say, like late spring, May, June. I kind of feel like this is kind of tying back in with what I said at the beginning, how coming of age stories need to have, for me at least, need to have a point where they pick up in pace, where like the story kind of happens faster because it's covering more years. It's covering years in less detail, and this is what the story does, but it only does it in like the last quarter of the book, I feel like. The beginning is really, really depressing. It's like a very long description of how his mom dies and how his dad dies, how he's alone with his sister and his brother. Like really in-depth descriptions of how angry he is at the world and how like the weirdest things happen to him, and he like gets chased in a parking lot, and like little things like that that can take up pages and pages. And I was just like, oh, yeah, okay, like I get this is just a story about your life, but like, are we going anywhere with this once again? So I pushed through it in steps and in phases, and I enjoyed the last phase the most because it was just the most interesting. It was a little more upbeat and just a little more looking into the future, as opposed to kind of holding on to the moment and holding on to the grudges and everything that happened and that was so bad. And then I finished the book and realized it's an autobiography, and that was actually in good parts his actual life story. And then I felt like a really, really bad human being, because I had basically been judging what I thought to be a fictional character for holding on to grudges and just being a negative person, when it's like, oh, no. That is an actual person who that happened to. I don't know how far it goes into being reality and where like the fiction starts, but still I felt pretty terrible. If I had known that it was an autobiography, I would have liked it more from the beginning. So always read the text in the back about the author, I guess, because that's literally the last thing I did, and had I done that at first, I would have known. With those 4 books, I struggled finishing them, but I did, and I feel like it would be cool if you, as always, would share books where you struggled with, that you finished, that you maybe not finished in the end, and why you didn't finish them. And yeah, I was happy to talk to you. It was cool being here. Thank you for watching this video, and hit me up on my socials if you want to talk or if you have any questions. I would be very happy to answer them for you. And when you watch this video, I'm actually probably just about to go to New York and have a good old time there. So I'll see you afterwards, and I'm hopefully bringing back some good memories and stories. Until then, bye!